Hello, everyone. Welcome to NETGEAR's live event, where we're going to be talking about the latest inflection of Wi-Fi technology, which is Wi-Fi 6E. And I'm here joined with Sandeep, our VP of Consumer Product here at NETGEAR. He's been with us for 11 years. He's overseen the launch of our Orbi Wi-Fi systems, the Nighthawk routers, as well as all these technology shifts like Wi-Fi 4, Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 6, and now Wi-Fi 6E. And we're also joined with Brian Nadel, who's former editor-in-chief of Mobile Computing and Communications magazine. He is a 35-year technology journalist veteran and written about many subjects around ranging from nuclear reactors to computing and genetic engineering. As the senior editor of PC magazine, he oversaw the production of the first third of every magazine issue, which was great. And now as a freelance writer, he is pushing out many publications for Tom's Guide. And so I'm done talking. Now I'll let these guys introduce themselves, and then we can get into why you guys are here, which is Wi-Fi 6E. So, Sandeep.
Thank you, Spencer. And first of all, thank you, Brian, for joining us. Always great to meet you and talk to you. My name, as I said, is Sandeep Harpalani. I'm the Vice President for Product Management and have been involved in a lot of these Wi-Fi technology transitions at NETGEAR in the past 11 years. And I'll look forward to talking more to you about some of the latest introductions about 6E, talk about some of our latest products, that's technology, and have a good discussion. So look forward to it.
So a very exciting time to be doing something like this. Lots going on.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess with that, we'll open the floor. So Sandeep, I just kind of want to maybe on a high level introduce what Wi-Fi 6E is, and then we can kind of go into a deeper dive.
Yeah, so Wi-Fi 6E is the latest update or introduction in terms of new technology on the Wi-Fi side. To go a little bit further back in terms of typically you have Wi-Fi transmitting on a particular spectrum. So you have the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz. So Wi-Fi 6E adds an additional spectrum that can be used for Wi-Fi transmission. So it adds an additional band, the 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi band that can be utilized in terms of Wi-Fi transmission. Why is it a big deal? Well, think about it. Last time that we added additional spectrum that can be used for Wi-Fi was about 20 years ago. So it's long overdue. If you think about the number of devices that you had maybe 20 years ago and number of devices that you have right now, the number of neighbors who have Wi-Fi, the internet speeds and all those things, everything has improved or increased. So this will resolve, I think one of the key issues that we have is in terms of the interference. The current infrastructure is overcrowded. There's a lot of technology improvements happen from 11N, from Wi-Fi 4 to Wi-Fi 5 to Wi-Fi 6, but 6E is a huge thing because it's adding a new 16-lane highway that is going to resolve a lot of these issues in terms of interference and is much more ready for having more devices, having more applications. You talk about new applications like AR, like VR, and so on, 8K streaming. All these applications require bandwidth, and this is a huge improvement that will help us.
I'd like to actually add something, and that it's there's a gigahertz, more than a gigahertz of new spectrum, and it pretty much doubles the amount of bandwidth that's available. It is the biggest change in 2-3 generations, I think.
That's very true. So just to give you some numbers here, what you spoke about, like 5 gigahertz is 500 megahertz. The 6 gigahertz is 1.2 gigahertz. It's more than double in terms of the bandwidth number of channels available. I think, and one more critical thing here is typically you transfer in terms of number of channels, 20 megahertz, 40 megahertz, 80 or 160 megahertz. Now 160 megahertz is a huge deal when you're able to transfer at 160 megahertz because it means on your phone, you can actually get a gigabit connection if you're able to get transfer on 160 megahertz. Now 160 megahertz means a lot of these channels need to work together. So having on the 5 gigahertz, because of the bandwidth available, effectively you have 2 channels of 160 megahertz. which require a DFS certification, which is just to make you simplify this, is not an open channel. You share this channel with other critical services. So whenever there's any critical service, you have to basically leave the channel and go back to 80 megahertz.
Right, and the 6 gigahertz channel in 6E gives you 6 new ones untouched by pretty much any technology.
Yeah, actually 7 of them in terms of total. 7 new channels are added by the 6 gigahertz band in terms of, so that's a pretty significant improvement. And that means you can get, if whatever speeds you have, you're actually able to get much faster speeds on these with the 6 gigahertz band, because you're utilizing all that additional bandwidth and much faster connection. So yeah, great point, Brian, on that.
Yeah, and it's for high performance use almost entirely, gaming, artificial, augmented reality, virtual reality, the goggles. So it is putting the bandwidth where it's really needed right now.
Right. And one more important thing here is that this additional band can be utilized by newer devices, because you need to support on these newer devices the 6 gigahertz band. So it's not only having that 16-lane highway, it's also having that you have the fastest devices. Most likely your current phone, mobile phone, or your next phone that you're going to buy, all those will support the 6 gigahertz band. So you can get much more faster speeds on that 6 gigahertz band. You spoke about gaming.
There's one big requirement in there, that is, if it's for a notebook, it has to be Windows 11 right now. Yes. And no Macs. I don't think Linux has caught up yet, so it'll be a while for those platforms to catch up.
Right, and I think it'll take some time in terms of before everybody does, but as is usually the case, I think you'll see the mobile phones. There are already a couple of mobile phones out there, Android devices that support Wi-Fi 6E. You also see a lot of these smart TVs and so on that are coming up, which is supporting Wi-Fi 6E. So this is going to be a huge step in terms of our ability to handle more number of devices, to have a much more robust connection, better capability in terms of handling interference, whether it's from a neighborhood and neighbors and so on, and just making sure that Wi-Fi becomes a lot more reliable and robust. Which is extremely critical. I think at this point in time, with people working from home and all those things, it's a lifeline. It's one of, as I say, it's a joke around. It's one of the critical things, requirements for a home. And it depends whom I ask. If I ask my teenager son, he will say it's the most critical thing, more important than food and water, because he can always get food and water once he has Wi-Fi.
So Sandeep, I checked this morning and I have 34 devices connected to my home network. What's your count at the moment?
Well, I'm more like 50 plus on the devices, and I think this is the new reality in terms of people are adding more and more devices that are connected devices. It's almost impossible today not to find an electronic device, the next gadget that you're buying, whether it's your refrigerator, whether it's your vacuum, or even your Instapot. All of these have internet connectivity. So think about it, the number of devices are not going to get less, and they're going to explode more and more. You'll have more and more devices happening. So it definitely helps in terms of having this additional bandwidth. Would be a critical, I think, an improvement that will help us in terms of making Wi-Fi a much more robust in terms of handling this growth that we are seeing.
And do you think that some of the older devices like thermostats, not video cameras, but some of the older devices, maybe you should restrict to the 2.4 gigahertz channel just because, they don't have the needs for high bandwidth?
Yeah, so I think what will happen is as typically the devices that will support the 6 gigahertz would be your mobile devices, would be your laptop, would be your smart TV. devices on which you typically utilize or have a screen associated with it where you're consuming media, right? IoT devices typically don't require as much bandwidth, and they can retain and continue to be on 2.4 gigahertz, but or 5 gigahertz. The benefit here will be that as you move these high bandwidth devices from 2.4 and 5 to 6 gigahertz, you're actually giving more bandwidth available to these devices on 2.4 and 5. So it's again, like example I like to give is like you're having this one lane, which is a much more faster lane, and it moves all the traffic there. You're able to get the faster speeds there. And then other lanes, you have a bike lane and so on, which can still continue, and you have that space available that you can utilize that in terms of doing it. So overall, it should help the entire home network, whether you have 2.4 gigahertz devices with IoT, or you have 5 gigahertz slightly older devices, or the latest 6 gigahertz devices, of course, will get the benefit because of that additional infrastructure.
Because some of them don't need constant connections, you know, a lock or thermostat, as I said before, or a light bulb, only when it's turned on and off or used. And that doesn't require the high-end bandwidth.
That is correct. Yeah. So in terms of you really require that with faster devices. That's where, or gaming devices. Gaming, as you mentioned, was one more use case that's interesting with 6 gigahertz, because you're able to reduce the latency. And that's a big deal in terms of if I can reduce my ping rate from 100 to 50 or 10 milliseconds, which is what is the case with 6 gigahertz. So it definitely helps us in terms of utilizing some of these new applications that are coming up. You mentioned augmented reality and virtual reality also. All of those require much more faster response times and lower latencies. And that will also be enabled with the new 6 gigahertz band.
Yeah, no, because if you lose a frame or two, you notice it.
Right. Right, especially on Zoom calls and so on. It's like immediately any kind of delay, you will notice some of those things. And some of the latest data again is that during this pandemic timeframe, the internet usage, the bandwidth usage has grown not only for downstream, which is basically for when you're watching a Netflix movie, and also, but for upstream, which is all these Zoom calls that we have. So. It's about a 40% improvement in terms of downstream, but there's a 60% improvement in terms of upstream. So
right,
that's
because each Zoom call has at least 2 video signals coming at each other.
Yes, yes. And typically your upstream speeds, which is basically going to the internet, are much less than what is coming into your home.
They're typically 20, 30 megabit a second, not 200 to a gigabit.
Yes. So there's a question here in terms of, so older devices will not be compatible. Older device, basically it's backward compatible. All these devices are backward compatible. If you support the 6 gigahertz band, you'll actually take advantage of that. Otherwise, you would go to the 5 gigahertz band or the 2.4 gigahertz. So as a customer, you don't need to worry about interoperability as a case. But if you want to take advantage of that faster speed, yes, you would need devices which support the 6 gigahertz band, right? For example, right now, I think the Samsung Galaxy and the Fold, both of them support the 6 gigahertz band.
Yeah.
And we use at Tom's Guide the Galaxy Book Pro for our testing, and it's one of the rare 6E notebooks available right now.
Yeah. So, and I'm seeing already a lot more devices coming up. There's some smart TVs that are out there. Applications which require that additional bandwidth. I think there's a lot of benefit in terms of supporting that 6 gigahertz band on these newer devices. And most likely, the next device that the customer will buy, which will be your phone or which will be your laptop, or as I said, a smart TV, will support 6 gigahertz. And that's why it makes sense to, as you're looking into the market for maybe replacing your home router or your Wi-Fi mesh system, you want to look at it to make sure that you have the support for the latest technology. And that gives you that future proofing to a certain extent to make sure that your investment is protected. And it doesn't happen that when you buy your next gadget, your next mobile device, your home network becomes needs to be updated, or it's not able to take advantage of that improved speeds.
And I'm sure you'd agree with me that future proofing really means 5 years or so, because everything happens so quickly in this business.
Right. And future proofing, of course, is a relative term. As I said, if you talk about a phone with an average life of maybe 2 to 3 years, hey, that's long enough. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I would like to move us towards the dedicated backhaul. And I would also like to let any of our viewers know that if you could put your questions in the Q&A, we'll have a Q&A section at the end of this where we'll address all of these questions. But so Sandeep, I want you to elaborate more on like the dedicated backhaul, what that means for Wi-Fi 6.
Yeah, so maybe a question before is like between router and a mesh, because that question comes up is as you have our Nighthawk products here, we have our Orbi products here. The key difference between a router and a mesh product is that mesh is extendable, it's multiple units typically. So you have a central product, which is the router, and then you have these satellites. And the benefit of having these router and satellites is that you can spread them throughout your home, and you can get the same kind of your intention is to basically get Wi-Fi throughout your home.
And while the emphasis is almost always on in mesh, the speed from the home, the base router to the satellites, as you say, it's equal important for the satellites to communicate with the router, and that's the backhaul. And your products have been based on a dedicated backhaul where you have a dedicated 5 gigahertz channel for it, which actually works quite well, streamlines the communications. Other companies use a dynamic one where they move the data onto the stream that is least being used at the moment.
Right. So the key problem that mesh is solving is basically your in-home distribution of Wi-Fi. Because you want to basically make sure, as Brian was saying, as you're mentioning, that you want to basically spread this. If you're getting a gigabit connection at one corner of the house, you basically want that same gigabit speeds throughout. And that's where the dedicated backhaul comes in. The way we approached it is we looked at it and said, okay, what's the best way for a customer to make sure that as they add more devices, if they're getting a gigabit at one corner of the house, they're getting the same gigabit speed on the satellite also. So it's not only getting the range, but it's also getting the performance that you're getting at one corner of the house and throughout. So that's why you have these Wi-Fi bands, which are for talking to the devices, but then you have a dedicated Wi-Fi band, which is only used for connecting the router to the satellite. So think of it like a highway between two different locations, and you want to make sure that if you want to make this whole drive efficient, you want to get to highways as quickly as possible, and you want least number of interruptions on that highway. So having that 5 gigahertz band or having that additional band, which is a dedicated band, ensures that as you add more devices, as you add even more satellites and so on, it does not impact your overall performance. So it makes it, the biggest benefit I would say is that if you have a gigabit or whatever is your internet speed, 500 megabits or whatever, you want to make sure that you're getting the same internet speeds throughout your home. And the best way to do this is to have that virtual wired connection between the router and the satellite, which makes sure that whatever internet speed you're getting on the router, you're getting on the satellite. And then you can ensure yourself that you have blanketed your home and you're getting the maximum speeds, you're getting the maximum benefit of the internet speeds that you're paying for as a customer on a monthly basis. All the gadgets that you have, your smart TVs and your IoT devices and your laptops and then the Netflix and the TikToks and all those things that you're trying to do at the same time, especially if you're a home like me, which has got a bunch of two teenagers, it's always connected, always streaming something. I think that's where the benefit comes in, that you have that dedicated backhaul connection to ensure that you're not only getting the best Wi-Fi, you're getting the best range, you're getting the best performance throughout the home.
Yeah, and I feel like it helps as well when you have like a bunch of smart lights, those aren't going to be slowing down what's going on your phone.
Yes, and it also gives you the range in terms of, again, the benefit here is that now you have these IP cameras and so on that might be outside the home, or you might now, with the pandemic situation, might be basically saying, okay, I want to move my location. I get tired of sitting in my room. I move to a different location. I'm sitting in the backyard. I'm sometimes in the garage. I want my internet connectivity everywhere. And especially with the pandemic situation, I'm in my room, my wife is in a separate room, my kids are in, all of us are spread out throughout the house, and all of us are on Zoom calls or Netflix streaming and so on. And it just helps us in terms of making sure that we have a reliable Wi-Fi connection. And I think the dedicated backhaul is a key piece of it that ensures that it's not suddenly one device that's hogging up all the bandwidth. Your backhaul is completely separate, which connects the router and the satellite from your front haul. And I think that's the best architecture.
There's another way to approach it. And I don't know many people are using this, but you can connect the router to a satellite to another satellite using cable, using Ethernet cables, if you're lucky enough to live in a house with cable built in, and it works phenomenally well in that case.
Right, and if you have that luxury, absolutely, the router supports it, and Orbi supports it, and you can do that. But I think most of us don't have that luxury, and this is where I think this kind of as a best is call it like a virtual wired connection, is that it's the best approximation in terms of having a real wire connected, because you have a dedicated Wi-Fi connection that is connecting the router and the satellite.
Yeah, no, in our testing, the connection between the host and the satellite at about 15 feet was a little bit over a gigabit a second, which is, wired speeds. I could never have expected that 5 years ago from this type of equipment.
So the second secret sauce that we have in addition to the dedicated backhaul is the number of streams. So typically you'd find these numbers like 4x4 and 2x2 and all those things. It's the best approximation is like number of lanes on highway. So of course you want a highway, but 4 lanes is better than 2, or 8 lanes is better than 4, and so on. So having a dedicated backhaul, which is also quad stream, is better than having a dual stream and so on. So it's double the bandwidth. So and typically on all our Orbi routers, the 7, 8, and 9 series, all of them actually have a 4x4, a quad stream dedicated backhaul, which means that it's not only a dedicated connection, but it's also big enough.
It's a huge dedicated
that is designed to make sure that whatever is your internet speed, you're getting the same internet speed as Brian's been mentioning. It's like you could actually see that gigabit speed on the satellite itself, right?
But one of the downsides of 6 gigahertz is its range is extremely limited. So it's best for same room, next door at best, and at about 20, 30 feet, it drops out and the 5 gigahertz takes over, which is no slouch as far as bandwidth goes, but is less.
Right. So I think the best way to explain a dedicated backhaul is you have a separate Wi-Fi band that is only used for connecting the router to the satellite. It's not shared with any other devices. It is dedicated for that connection between the router and the satellite. So typically you would find dual band routers. Orbi is tri-band. The latest introduction that we have, the 960, is a quad band because it supports the 6 gigahertz band. The Wi-Fi 6E, the latest one, that has the 2.4, 5, and 6 gigahertz. Plus, it has one more Wi-Fi band, which is the 5 gigahertz band that is used for connectivity here.
And I can show that graphic if we want.
And as you mentioned, Brian, in terms of 6 gigahertz actually has lower range. It has much faster speed, but it has lower range. Now, there's effort happening in the industry at this point in time to basically move this and support faster, higher power amplifiers to make sure that the speed and the range will get much better. I think we'll see some of these improvements happening by early next year. But right now, what we do is we use that 5 gigahertz on, if you stay on the last screen, the 5 gigahertz is basically the one that we're using for backhaul because it has the best range. And especially at that, especially for the satellite where you're keeping it far away, you want to make sure that you're able to get a good connection. So we do support the 6 gigahertz on Orbi, but really for connecting to your devices, end devices, your mobile devices, and your smartphones.
Yeah, I mean, some of your competitors are using the 6 gigahertz for their backhaul, and it doesn't really work very well because of that limited range.
That is true. It's an issue in terms of, because I think we'll solve this problem in terms of range at some point in time, but it's not solved today. So with this, I think the key thing here is to make sure that we are trying to optimize the best performance and the best range. And the benefit here with this 5 gigahertz dedicated backhaul with Orbi is that the router and satellite both support quad stream. Typically a devices supports only 2 streams. So it's really is a big highway that is there for connecting multiple devices. So this is on the screen, what you see is an example of a shared backhaul versus dedicated backhaul. So what happens is, as you add more devices, as you add more satellites, that same Wi-Fi is being used to connect to your end devices, to your mobile phones, to your TVs, as well as to the satellite. So as you add more load at the same time, when you're trying to do Zoom calls, you're trying to stream Netflix and watch TikTok videos and everything, it is basically utilizing the same bandwidth. It's a shared bandwidth. So you have one device, that iPad that you see, and you start downloading a big file on that would choke up the entire network. And that's a key problem. So what we're trying to do with the dedicated backhaul is resolve this issue that one particular device cannot hog up all the bandwidth. And it's designed that as you add more and more devices, this main connection between the router and satellite is not impacted, and you're able to get the same speed, as I said, what you're getting from your internet provider, whatever it is, on the router, as well as the satellite, on every satellite in the home.
All right, and I'm gonna stop sharing here. Okay, nice, perfect. So that was a great explanation of the backhaul, and I think that it would be cool for us to move on to maybe some of the additional benefits of our Orbi systems and the Nighthawk router with these services.
Right. So on all our Wi-Fi, on all our router products as well as mesh products, we do support our Armor, which is a security solution, as well as Smart Parental Controls, which is a solution for managing for basically managing screen time for kids. Armor specifically is an interesting and I think almost an essential product with today's world where everybody is connected. You have so many devices connected, so many devices, especially IoT devices, they're always connected to the cloud. They may be pinging the cloud and so on. A risk in terms of some kind of a cyber threats, and that could be coming from a device that you bought, software that you downloaded, a phishing mail that you received, and so on. I've received the number of phishing mails that I've received, have started to receive is like crazy, and they get more and more better. It's like one of them that I recently received was about, hey, share with us your vaccination information so that you can then, and they look almost like a real email from my health insurance and so on. And what Armor does is basically, instead of running your antivirus that you're typically familiar with on your every PC and so on, we do have that, but the critical piece comes in terms of running it on the router itself.
You're being a little too low key about this, Sandeep, because this is one of the most important parts of Orbi, and Armor protects at both the router level, but also at the client level. So for instance, I pay $120 a year to Bitdefender for my antivirus software for my family. It comes with Orbi, and it's $99 a year for as many clients as you want to download and use. So it not only protects, but it's also a good value. It's the best buy I know in antivirus software right now.
That is true. And it's not only covers the antivirus for each and every PC, as I said, in your home or for your mobile devices, but it also protects your IoT devices, for which you don't have a solution today, really. There's nothing there out that can help you in terms of suddenly your IoT device gets hacked into and it starts going to a rogue website. There's nothing that protects your home network.
Yep, and there are so many video cameras and things like that that just do not have the capacity to update the firmware, or the companies just put it out and abandon it.
Yeah, and some of these products don't even have enough memory and all those things to do a firmware upgrade. Nobody knows how to go and access the user GUI and go through an upgrade process. So having the software run on the router itself basically makes sure it's like putting a front door lock to your home. It's making sure that the access to the internet. So anytime I received this email about vaccination by mistake, I clicked on it, it'll immediately block that. And say, this is a rogue website, and it goes and blocks that information, and you receive a notification on your phone to say this was blocked. So it's protecting all my 50 plus devices in the home. I have my antivirus installed on my PC, on my kids' PC, and so on. So when they go out and go do gaming and so on, and bring that PC back home, it's still protected. So it's a complete package which provides basically protection from the router level to make sure it protects all the devices in the home network. It includes end devices like your laptops, so you have the antivirus in all of them. We also have VPN, which is included here. So if you're going on a Starbucks and suddenly want to make an Amazon purchase and so on, you want to use your credit card, you want that connection to be secure. So
and just as how there will always be more devices on your network, the internet will always be more dangerous tomorrow than it is today. And you really do have to wear a belt and suspenders to protect yourself. You know, as much security as you can get probably isn't even enough.
And really, to think about it, as you said, it's $99 for a year's subscription that covers antivirus software for all the devices that you have in your home, protects all your devices, gets you a VPN connection for doing some of these critical transactions and so on. Is a great deal.
Smart parental controls.
Moving on to smart parental controls. So that's, I mean, one of the key things in terms of which is coming up with, especially with preteens and teens. Everybody has their own devices and they're always connected to it. And as a parent, it's not possible to say, hey, I'm going to take away your device, or I'm going to turn off your internet access. Internet is used for work, is used for doing homework, is basically using for connectivity. You don't want to do that in terms of, so smart parental control is again a unique solution that accesses, basically provides some way for parents and for children themselves to basically look at how are they using the internet. They're trying to figure out in terms of how much time was done chatting, how much time was done gaming, and how much time was actually doing work. Because if I ask my son, he'll always tell me, he's been only playing for 30 minutes. But now I have the app and he has the app too, and say, hey, look, you have been playing for the last 3 hours. What are you doing? It's
and you've got your math homework to do.
Yes, yes. It makes it a much more of a baseline to have that discussion with kids. It's not a restrictive kind of approach that is there, hey, this is how you have to pay and so on. I asked my son to say, how much is a reasonable time that you should be gaming in a day? And he actually came out with an hour, which I thought was very good, considering the amount that he has been playing so far. So it certainly makes it, you have the information to have that dinner table conversation with your kids about how they're spending the internet time, and to build some of these healthy habits in terms of how to manage the time. And I think this will be one of the key skills as we go forward, because we'll be more and more connected. It's not going to be less connected. So building that muscle, building that skill on how to utilize your time is a key thing that I think we have to teach our kids. And And that's where I think a solution like Smart Parental Control helps you, because it gives you that information, breaks it down for you, where you can start having some of these discussions.
Yeah,
And I
feel
think
like
it's really important because the parental controls that NETGEAR have are based on a profile for each child. So you could have a 4-year-old that maybe you don't want to allow open access to, and you only want to allow a few different apps to be able to run, but you have a 15-year-old who you promised to let him game for an hour a night. So each child can have a different profile of their activities, and it works well, I think.
Yeah, and I think one more key thing here is that especially kids have multiple devices. So you could block one device, but suddenly they will realize, oh, I've used up my time on my phone. Now I go to my laptop. I've used up my time on the laptop. Now I go to an Xbox. Now I go to something else, or go to the iPad in terms of doing it. So having Smart Parental Control allows you to create a profile for each kid, associate all the devices that the child has with that profile, and then whether it's Xbox, whether it's an iPhone, whether it's a laptop, this is the total amount of time that they could play. This is the total amount of time that they can be online. This is a sleeping time. So you can set up quiet times during homework. You can set up a lights out time in terms of saying, hey, no more internet after 10 o'clock in the night or 9 o'clock in the night, or whatever you're comfortable about it, and as a child.
Just don't tell them the password.
yeah. Okay, very good. Okay, so I do want to, well, actually, if there's any other topics you guys want to talk about before we go to the Q&A, I want to open that up.
So I think just spend a minute in terms of, so we have these multiple products. So all of these are our Wi-Fi 6E product portfolio. So what you see here is our top of the line Orbi 963. So this supports the Wi-Fi 6E. It's the industry's first quad band mesh solution. So it supports all those things in terms of the Wi-Fi 6E, the dedicated backhaul, and is really the fastest solution that are out there. We have two other router products that we have introduced. The RXC 500 that you see here is tri-band 4x4. So it supports the 2.4, 5 gigahertz, and 6 gigahertz, 12 streams, and has support for the 2.5 gig port on the back. So you can actually have a multi-gig connection. And this is our newest router, the RXC 300, that will be shipping out recently soon. And this is basically takes some of these advantages, supports Wi-Fi 6E, has 2.4, has the best speed on 5 gigahertz, because that's where majority of your devices today are. So it's a reduction in terms of or a lower spec from the RXC 500, but still gives you the advantage in terms of giving you the best speed on 5 gigahertz, and on the 2.4 and the 6 gigahertz, it supports those latest technology also. So that's really our portfolio in terms of 3 products today that are out in the market: the mesh and the 2 routers that support Wi-Fi 6E. A lot more coming.
Do you have a feel for when Wi-Fi 7 will start to come into the conversation? Because it offers a lot more than 6E does. Almost rewrites the rules.
Yeah, so Wi-Fi 7 actually utilizes all that bandwidth that is available on the 6 gigahertz band in terms of, and then gives us a significant boost in terms of performance, in terms of it has some unique features where it allows you to combine multiple bands and all those things. But again, it's something that's expected by next year. We should most likely see, it's still far out. So sometime by maybe second half of next year, or just like in middle of next year timeframe, that we should start seeing some new products coming in. But again, I think the key thing here is, if you're looking for in the market for a product, the 6 gigahertz is a significant improvement in terms of future proofing. If you want to do, you want to basically make sure that you're utilizing the fastest speeds. You have products available today that support that. And of course, there's always something better coming in the future.
Well, and 320 megahertz channels will be just, the gamers will love it. They will just eat it up. But sure, it'll take another 6 or 9 months after the router's clients to come out, unfortunately.
Yes. So I think it'll follow the same. Most likely, you will see the Wi-Fi routers coming out first, and then devices will start trickling in. And clearly, I think that's always look forward in terms of how these new technology changes that are happening help us in terms of making sure that we're making Wi-Fi much more reliable, faster, and able to handle all these multiple devices that all the customers have been adding in their homes.
What do you think? We should be doing this again in about 18 months?
Hopefully sooner than that.
I'm game.
Nice, yeah. Okay, so I have some questions from the Q&A. So with Wi-Fi 6, there were security improvements. Are there any security improvements with Wi-Fi 6E as well?
Yeah, so the Wi-Fi 6E, the significant improvement is support for WPA3. So WPA3 is the technology that is used to connect your router to your devices. So Wi-Fi 6E only supports WPA3, which is a much more secure way of connecting. So older technologies, we also support Wi-Fi 6, we also support WPA3, but also supports older technologies. But with the 6 gigahertz band, because it's a newer product, all these newer products are required and so on, the industry decided basically to only support WPA3. So it also ensures that you're getting a much more secure connection that really very difficult for somebody to hack into, even if they're using a supercomputer. So that's, again, a very significant improvement that's happening to make sure that as we have more devices in the home, using WPA3 will help. And that's the only way that can be used to connect on the 6 gigahertz band.
Perfect, cool. And then another question in regards to if your Orbi satellites are on another floor from your Orbi router, will that impact the speed of the overall system? I think this more has to do with the 5 gigahertz backhaul versus the 6 one.
It works quite well going up and down floors. It's one of the tests we do at Tom's Guide, where I set up the satellite floor above and below where the router is, and a lot of data flows through. And it works equally well through walls. So it will work with many newer, older houses and fill them all with data.
That's a great answer.
Yeah. So I think Brian has been doing a lot of testing on our products, and has I think you have some reviews, and it'll be interesting. Please look at some of these reviews. This is exactly the problem that we are trying to solve, is basically making sure that you have a great connection with the router and the satellite, and having that dedicated backhaul, which is connecting the router and satellite, having it as a quad stream ensures that you have a lot more flexibility on where you place the satellite. So even if it is far away, most likely you're able to get a good connection from the router, because it's a big, as I said, it's a 4-lane highway. So that means you have a lot more capability to basically put that. But if you, I think once you have set up the satellite, look at your network map in the app. If you are too far away, and you're actually connecting on the 2.4 gigahertz band, it'll actually tell you that there's something wrong in it, in terms of maybe need to move it closer. But most likely, most the typical situation, you should not have this issue, because it's really designed with that dedicated backhaul that people will keep their satellites where it makes sense, in terms of will not be able to dictate to them that it has to be 2 walls away and so on. If you have multi-storied home, the best way would be to have the router on one floor, having the satellite on the second floor, and if you have a third floor or a basement, put that third one there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It will work probably equally well with, a lot of people have their modems in the basement. You put the router there, satellite on the first floor, satellite on the second floor, or with the router in the middle floor, with it going up and down.
Yeah, absolutely.
And try to play around a little bit in terms of, because all of these are pre-configured. It's very easy. You just can take a satellite, move it from one location to a different location, and see if it helps in terms of if you are having an issues, or if you want to see, hey, have a TV, I want to make sure that you're getting a good connection. You can play around with this. The key thing to understand about satellite placement is you want to make sure you're getting a good connection from the router, because it can only amplify the internet connection that is the Wi-Fi connection that it's getting from the router side. So if it's too far away at two extreme corners of the house, that may not be the best placement. But as I said, the satellite is quite powerful with the dedicated backhaul that gives you a lot more flexibility.
Yeah. I mean,
really, the only constraint here is where you have your AC outlets, because it has to be plugged in. And you give a 2-foot cord, 3-foot cord with it, but as long as you have an AC outlet where you need it to be, you're set.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so another question is, does neighbors' Wi-Fi interfere with the 5 gigahertz backhaul?
So there is always some level of interference from the neighbors and so on, and that's why the Wi-Fi technology is such that in terms of as you move farther away, as you have more interference, there's definitely will be an impact of this. Now, there are many things that we do to take care of that. Is like when the router boots up, it basically does it looks around and sees which are the channels that are free. And it basically picks up a channel where there's the least amount of interference. So there's a certain amount of intelligence built into the router to protect you. But if you're living in the middle of San Francisco with, or anywhere actually, with you'll typically see 10 to 15 other access points nearby or routers nearby. I think there'll definitely be an impact. But that's where having that additional bandwidth in terms of having that quad stream, having a powerful router, having a 4.4 quad stream on the 2.4, 5 gigahertz and 6 gigahertz will be huge to make sure that it can take care of that in terms of this interference, the more number of devices. Even when things are not the best, you're still able to get a pretty good connection that is good enough for any kind of media streaming or application that you're doing with least amount of buffering.
Fantastic. And then we got another one. So are you able to specifically assign bandwidth to individual devices with the Orbi?
No, so the way it is designed is that it's all kind of, we want to make it simple and easy for the customer, and has to be all the magic has to happen in the back in terms of making sure that you have one single network name. You don't have to decide in terms of whether it's connecting on 2.4, 5, and 6. All that, the router will decide on which is the best channel to connect to, which is the best device, which device requires the most bandwidth, and so on. So all that decision is really done with this mesh technology and is designed to ensure that you're not taking a decision as a customer, because it's difficult and it most likely will take some wrong decisions here. So having the router decide how to distribute devices between the 3 Wi-Fi bands, making sure that if your device actually supports the 6 gigahertz, it will connect on the 6 gigahertz band, making sure that as you move throughout your home, from one end of the house, from the router to the satellite, can basically move that device from the router to the satellite without dropping a connection, without having any kind of delay. So all that is the magic that happens in the back end to make sure that we call this mesh technology, which is enabling that, right?
But what you can do is you can set up priorities for 3 or 4 different devices. I usually am number 1 in my household, but it makes it so that you have top dibs on the data.
Yes.
Perfect. And then we have someone who's going to upgrade from their R7000. It's been doing really good for a really long time. And they just kind of want to know the main differences between the 9 series, the 8 series, and then any of our, and the 7 series, for example.
Right. So I think the first decision is really between a router and a mesh, right? So typically our routers are quite capable in terms of providing you good coverage, and especially depending on if it's not at one corner of the house, which you can place it somewhere center, you'll actually be able to get a reasonably good coverage. Now, mesh comes in as you have a bigger house, or you have specific issues in terms of coverage. I spoke about if you're living in San Francisco downtown with all this interference and everything, you might need a mesh system to basically, even if it's a smaller home, to basically make sure that you're getting the best coverage out of it, right? Now, between 7, 8, and 9, all of these Orbis mesh systems support the latest Wi-Fi 6 technology. All of them actually have a dedicated backhaul. all of them have 4 streams in terms of dedicated backhaul. The difference between 7 and 8 is the front haul speed doubles between 7 and 8. So if you're looking for a slightly better coverage, looking for a better range, more number of devices, you should go from Orbi 7 to Orbi 8. Orbi 9 basically adds one more Wi-Fi band, which is the Wi-Fi 6E. So it's basically capable in terms of supporting the latest technology. Also in terms of Ethernet ports and so on, the 960 supports the 10 gig. So it's really future-proofing you in terms of internet speeds. So whatever maximum internet speeds that you could get, you can support it on the 960. On the 850, you support up to 5 gigabits Ethernet ports. So you have that capability to do that. And the 750 is really a gigabit speeds. So
I will take that question from a totally different. If you have a gigabit service, get the 9. It's the only thing around that will really. The other extreme of 100 or from your internet provider, the 700 should be fine. The 800 will work better, but you should only think of the 900 as.
Right, and at the same time, I think supporting the latest technology, clearly it is the best spec product out there in terms of supporting the quad band and supporting the fastest speeds here. With internet speeds increasing, it's the bigger the pipe has, the better in-home distribution system you need. So definitely, if you are looking for, if you are paying for internet speed or plan to pay for internet speed soon enough or anytime soon, it might be a very good investment to make sure that you're getting the best out of your internet speeds, out of all the gadgets that you have at home, all the streaming services that you have at home. Add those all up. This is really a great investment to make sure that you can make the best use of all that amount of money that you spend or have spent in terms of buying these devices or continue to spend in terms of all the subscription services that you might be having. At least in my home, at least have 3 or 4 streaming services that we subscribe to. Yeah.
Right. No, and if you pay for gigabit service, you should expect to get it in every room.
Yes.
Yep. And so we got time for one last question before we do a giveaway, which is a surprise for the viewers. I didn't even tell you that. So is there a limit to the number of satellites you can have in your Orbi system?
So theoretically, there is no limit in terms of doing it, but clearly, as you add more and more devices and so on, we kind of you will see some kind of a limit
further away.
Yeah, and you get to go further away and so on. I've seen installations with up to 9 to 10 satellites that work pretty well. I think going beyond that, at some point in time, you will start seeing a degrading performance between those. So I think typically we sell a pack of 3. You can easily go to 4, 5, 6, 7. I think with the dedicated backhaul and with the quad stream fast speeds, you have a lot of bandwidth here to basically make sure that you're getting a good coverage.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
I think the 3-pack of the 960 covers something like 9,000 square feet.
Yes.
If you're living in a bigger house than that, you've got other problems.
Okay. Well, and we did a random name generator for who's going to win an Orbi 9 series from whoever participated in the Q&A.
Lucky participant.
Yeah, I know you just made a lot of money. Melissa Spino, congratulations.
Congratulations, Melissa. Thank you all for attending this, and thank you, Brian, for being a part of this.
Thank you, Sandy, for inviting me. I had a good time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and I'll end this now. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.